Well, folks, good morning. This is Dan Sullivan speaking. I happen to be the RVP for the Eastern region for Conducive Technologies, and I wanted to welcome everybody here to our webinar this morning about how to boost SQL and application performance at least 30%. And you're going to see some examples here of where folks get over 2x plus performance increase just by installing our patented IO reduction software. So pretty exciting results that folks are seeing in their SQL and Windows environments. So we'll share that information with you today. And we've also spared no expense in bringing in a special guest to join me today. We have our Conducive Senior Vice President of Technology Strategy, Gary Kwan, on the line. GQ, are you out there?
Dan, I'm out here and glad to be here with you. And I'm here to handle any deep dive questions, but don't let Dan fool you. Although he says he's RVP of sales, he's very technically minded too. But Dan, let me give a shout out on this. We like to make this, session very interactive. And there's a little question Q&A box over there. So, anytime throughout the session, go ahead and put your questions out there. And we'll either answer them during the session or we'll get to them at the end of the session and get all your questions answered. Thanks, Dan.
GQ, thank you. And as you can see already, folks, that GQ keeps me honest in any discussion here, and I usually add any technical discussion. So, GQ, pleasure to have you join today. Thanks very much. So, folks, as we mentioned, it's all about improving application performance on your existing hardware. So, with that, just one slide about who Conducive is. Some of you may know us from a previous life. We used to be the Disk Keeper Corporation. So we were the world's preeminent disk defragmentation software product. Been in business over 38 years, 12th oldest software company in the world. Sold over 100 million licenses of both Disk Keeper and Velocity, used in 90% of the Fortune 500. But we rebranded ourselves in 2012 because the world virtualized. And in doing so, you no longer defragged a SAN or an SSD. So GQ and his engineering team totally respun the Diskkeeper product, renamed it Velocity, to where it's now today two light filter drivers that sit in the Windows OS and optimize IO. And we'll talk about what those two filter drivers do. But on average, they reduce about 30% of IO to backend storage, again, on existing hardware, even all flash. And that 30% plus reduction has translated into customers' applications improving anywhere from 50 to 300%. And we'll talk about some of those customers here in this presentation. The software is OEM by the folks you can see here: HP, SanDisk, Western Digital, Lenovo. Actually, 9 of the top 10 PC manufacturers OEM'd our software. They put it in their laptops and workbooks because, again, it's more efficient. This is our patented DRAM caching engine that they OEM'd. And those folks build their own caching engines, but ours is so intelligent and so smart that they decided that we were better than what they had for the applications that they needed us for. So pretty proud of that. And because of what we do and have done for 30 plus years in Windows environment, we're a close partner with Microsoft. Because of what we do around improving performance in virtualized environments, we're a close partner with VMware. And again, because of what we do in the SQL environment around improving performance, we most recently certified under this Microsoft SQL Server IO Reliability Certification, brand new certification from Microsoft. And GQ, you want to share with the folks a little bit about that?
Yeah, Dan, and I thought this was a very nice accolade for us. Microsoft has certain certifications to make sure third-party products are fully compatible in reliability with their products, in this case, SQL Server. Now, besides going through stringent testing, we also had to go up in front of a board of SQL experts there, and we passed them. Fact is, we're the only software company to have this certification, but we're in good company with people like HP, Dell, EMC. So this is a nice accolade to show how well we work with SQL Server, Dan.
Yeah, well, again, congratulations, GQ, on that. And by the way, folks, that was also the testing was done in the cloud in Azure. So our software is relevant both on-premise and in the cloud, and we'll talk about that even more during the presentation. And again, as GQ mentioned, no question is a bad one, so please use that question box to put in any of the questions you have here during the presentation. So we've talked about some examples of what customers have experienced. Just wanted to share with you, a few of these, and I'm not going to read all of these to you, but you can see that across all of these Windows-based applications, SQL, SharePoint, Exchange, CRM, ERP applications, our patented I/O reduction software delivers incredible results. And quite frankly, folks, because Windows is so inefficient, and we help and coach Windows to be as efficient as possible, presenting the most efficient I/O for your infrastructure to deal with. We happen to do a lot of surveys. We survey over 1,000 IT professionals every year. This is the result of our latest survey. And as you can see here, we asked if do you have any performance issues on SQL? And over 28% of the respondents said yes, they did. And that number actually has been growing over time as opposed to decreasing. And so we, as GQ mentioned, not only in others, but clearly SQL is a real sweet spot for us, and we're going to tell you why that is. We did a word map of what the respondents talked about within that survey, and you can see here besides ERP solutions, Exchange, SharePoint, etc. SQL was the number one mentioned application that folks were needing to deal with to improve performance. And actually 7 out of our 10 new logo customers initially buy our software to improve SQL performance. And once they do that, they then roll it out across their entire environment. So what is the problem that exists in virtualized environments? Well, while virtualization has been great for server efficiency, it's been horrendous for I/O performance. What you'd like to see, and depicted here, is the most efficient I/O environment possible. Large contiguous writes emanating out of the Windows OS, hitting the hypervisor, moving down to storage and back again. And while I'm showing a virtualized environment example here, the same is true in a physical environment too. Large writes coming out of the application to storage and back again. But as soon as you virtualize, these two inefficiencies enter into the fray: the Windows I/O tax and the I/O blender effect. And GQ, you want to chat a little bit about how those two impact performance and environment?
Be glad to, Dan. The first one is really a result of the Windows file system. And as Dan says, what you would like is a nice sequential write going out of the file system down to the storage. And the reason for that is when you look at benchmarks of storage, they give you 2 benchmarks, one for sequential I/O and one for random I/O. And you notice the sequential I/O always outperform the random I/O. So if you want to get the most out of your storage, you want to try to get nice sequential I/O. That's that one part. But also by decreasing the number of a whole bunch of random I/O, you're also decreasing the amount of work the system has to do above the storage on trying to handle all that I/O. Now, why does this occur? Now, the reason it occurs on the virtual machines, or actually it occurs on any physical machine too, any Windows machine. When a file is created or extended, it doesn't know how big that creation or extension is going to be. So on the Windows side, and this is on the logical level, it just looks for the next allocation on that file system to put that data. And if that allocation big enough, it has to go find another allocation, and so forth and so forth. Well, each of those allocation is another IO, another fragment. So it doesn't know, to find the best allocation. So that results in all those random IOs. And we'll get later, we'll show you how we address this. And then later on, then coming down to the hypervisor, now you have all those random IOs getting mixed, and it has to try to handle back and forth, all these random IOs coming from the different virtual machines, and you get that IO blender effect. So that's what you're getting, all this extra traffic that's occurring, Dan.
Yep. Thanks, GQ. So folks, in this case, if you went to write a gigabyte of data, it may take 100,000 IOs to write that gigabyte of data. With our software optimizing your environment and having it look like this, it may only take 50 or 60,000 IOs to write that gigabyte of data. So you can appreciate what it means by that type of IO reduction. And the other best practice, while we're showing all of these different virtual machines into the hypervisor, it's also best to install us across all the VMs on a host. Because as this chart tries to depict here, while you can optimize one VM on a multiple VM host environment, if you don't optimize the others, all of that small random IO that gets further randomized by the hypervisor takes away from the optimization that you've done on that single VM. So while you may get some performance improvement, you won't get the same type of improvement you could expect to get if you had put us on all of the VMs on a host. And we'll talk about our licensing later, but we have a host-based license that covers all of those VMs. So where do we sit? As I said, we are two light filter drivers, and we sit above everything in your environment. GQ, you want to expand on that?
Sure, Dan, I will. By sitting here within the windows, we are attacking or optimizing the IO that is getting created right at the point it's getting created at the application level in the Windows system. And therefore, we're able to optimize it right there at the point of creation. But at the same time, where we're sitting here, we're actually just modifying or optimizing the Windows IOs, but it's still a Windows IO. And because of that, we're agnostic to any, network, storage, or hypervisor that's there. We work with all of them because it's still a Windows IO, Dan.
Yep, and thanks, GQ. So, folks, we tried to get all of the different systems on here. Again, we kind of would fall off the page. But we have folks using us on Extreme IO from Dell EMC, Pure Storage, Nimble, Nutanix, NetApp, and all the different hypervisors you can see there. Again, if it's compatible with Windows, it's compatible with us. And we sit above everything in your environment, just presenting the most efficient IO possible. So what do we do for SQL and, quite frankly, for all Windows application? As GQ has mentioned, more large contiguous writes, more payload in each IO operation. Our patented caching engine that GQ will talk about caches hot reads and uses idle and available DRAM. DRAM that's just sitting there, feet up on the desk, not doing anything, and we'll take advantage of that. And folks, everything we do is fully automated. There is nothing for you to do. And really, behind the scenes is built in basically a whole artificial intelligence engine that drives all of this IO reduction. Pretty impressive. We're going to show you a dashboard that shows you, what it is we're doing for you. We actually trademarked the set it and forget it moniker. So we beat the Ronco chicken guy to that. And we even have customers around a call yesterday, and it says, gee, because your software is just set it and forget it. It's great to see this dashboard now, et cetera, that, helps us see what it is you're doing. So pretty cool that we do all of this in the background and nothing for you to do. and we guarantee to improve performance or money back if that's what you'd like. But GQ, what I'd like to do now is kind of dive in a little bit to the two patented filter drivers that you've worked on. So you want to talk a little bit about IntelliWrite and IntelliMemory?
Sure, Dan, be glad to. One of the issues I mentioned before was that I/O attacks, where the Windows system is on any writes is making a whole bunch of random I/Os rather than sequential. And the reason why is it doesn't know how big that file is creation or extension is going to be. So we're doing something very simple here. We're actually mining your system in the background. So we know when a file gets created or extended, approximately how big it's going to be. And we just feed that intelligence back to the file system. So when the file system says, here comes a file creation or extension, rather than just going to find the next allocation, it's going to find the best fit allocation. So now when it writes out that I/O, it can find an allocation that'll take it all in one big write and write it out. So what does that mean for you? Well, rather than write it all, in this case, in the picture, 4 I/Os, it does it in one nice sequential I/O. And as I indicated, you're taking optimization to get the best performance of your storage, but you're also cutting down on the traffic going across that network there, and also all the extra work having to handle those extra I/Os. So uh, this is how we do it. Very simple, but it gets the job done. And
And
then
IntelliMemory, GQ.
yes, and the other one handles the I/O writes. What about the I/O reads? As Dan indicated, 9 out of the top 10 OEM manufacturers, PC manufacturers, actually license our caching technology. Well, you don't hear about us because they do it under their name, but they do it because we're very unique in how we do it. First of all, is our dynamic use of memory. We're only going to use memory that is available on the system, not being used. And if any system or user process comes in and needs a memory, we'll automatically give it up. So there's never any memory contention issue. So what does this mean for you? It means it's set and forget it. You don't have to go and allocate memory for caching. It's only going to use what's available and unused out there. Now, the next thing we do is we're very smart on what to put into cache or keep in cache for best performance. A lot of caching does this first in, and hopefully it's going to get cached again. So read comes in, it caches it and hopes, oh, it's going to get read again. Well, we're a little smarter than that. We're looking in the background, what data is getting hit the most? And that's one factor. Another factor is we know what type of data IOs cause performance issues, and we factor that in. And by doing that, we're going to get the best performance and able to cache that data. And what does this do for you? Well, when the IOs create that read IO, we're able to satisfy that IO right there on that system. And we're eliminating it having to travel down to the network to the storage to get satisfied. Now, I think Dan mentioned this, even if you have SSDs down there, the RAM on your system is 10 to 15 times faster than the SSDs. So you're not only getting that speed, but you're also getting the speed of eliminating it and having going through the network. Then Dan, there's one other pro on this, and that is we also cut down that network traffic that's going down the storage too. That means we just increase that bandwidth for other systems using that storage and that network there. So nothing but positive gains here, Dan.
Yep, it is, folks. It is pretty amazing, and looking forward to having you, try it here after the presentation. So again, IntelliWrite and IntelliMemory are the two patented filter drivers that GQ and his team have created that again, reduce IO up to 30% or more. As I mentioned, they all run in the background. There's nothing for you to do. Everything's fully automated. And as I said, it's we did trademark the set it and forget it moniker. But in that same regard, then people said, well, everything's feeling better, GQ, but what is it really doing for me? So again, in his infinite wisdom, GQ and his team created a dashboards for customers to view their systems and see what's going on. I've got an example here, GQ, of just the first dashboard in one of the the systems. Can you talk a little bit about what you're sharing here?
Yes, Dan, in this case, it's showing you the total IOs being eliminated from our software. Now, when we say eliminated, it's being eliminated from having to go down that storage to the storage to get satisfied. So it's still happening, but we're eliminating that extra traffic and overhead to get it done here. And in this case, it shows 90, almost 10 million IOs being eliminated just in the last 3 weeks on this one system. And mileage will vary depending upon the IO load on your system. And of these total IOs, there was about a 65, 35% ratio of read IOs to write IOs being eliminated here. But what does that actually save you? Well, since we know the latency of the IOs, we're able to calculate the time saved by eliminating these IOs, and that's what we're putting down there, the storage IO time saved, Dan.
Yep, no, great. Thanks, GQ. And there are multiple other screens you can see in the upper left there on IO performance and analytics. We just wanted to share at least this one for you to give you an idea of what you're going to see after you install the NFR copy that we'll send you after the presentation here. But again, so we have customers that have billions of IOs being eliminated, saving hundreds of days of IO storage time saved. Pretty impressive what this software can do for you. I wanted to share a few customer examples. Again, I'm not going to read all of these. You can read them faster than I can talk about them. But I'll just bring out a couple. Christus Health, which is one of the largest healthcare organizations in the good state of Texas, they virtualized, and after a couple of months, they ran into IO problems, performance issues, like we talked about in the beginning of the presentation, with all of the creation of all of that noisy random IO. They were going to spend $2 million to upgrade their NetApp environment. They were a Diskkeeper Corp customer. They came to us. They heard about Velocity. They said, well, why don't we give it a try? So they just installed Velocity in their environment, and they were able to delay this $2 million purchase for over 2 years because of the performance improvements that software created in their environment. Really impressive. And today, they have us on over 2,700 VMs in their environment. Bottom left here, Bell Mobility, the Verizon of Canada. Look at this. Reduced IO to their SAN 61% for 3x faster SQL queries. ASL Marketing. SQL batch imports dropped 15 hours just by installing our software. Folks, I think if I mention this without showing you these hardcore examples here, you'd say, Dan, what planet are you from? But these are all real life examples. But of course, what's important is what happens in your environment, and that's what we're looking forward to having you see. We have more examples here for you of what customers are seeing. I'll just speak briefly about the University of Illinois. They were a Diskkeeper customer also. They virtualized all brand new hardware, Dell 730 servers, 768 gigabytes of RAM, and all brand new flash compellent backend. So they were happy with what was happening in their environment. But they did a before and after test. They said they'd try Velocity. And again, on all this brand new hardware, without Velocity installed, running an Oracle database on Windows, they took 4.5 hours to process this one application, and it generated 13.9 million IOs to flash. After they installed Velocity, that 4 hours went to an hour and a half, and the 13.9 million IOs went to 2.7 million. GQ mentioned before the ability through IO reduction to increase bandwidth here, and that's exactly this is exactly a great example of that. Greg Landis, the IT director, said, Dan, I had spent all my money in the hardware. You've given me the headroom now to be able to add more applications to this existing environment because of your software. And again, I'm sure you've read some of these other examples that are here. So really, how do I guarantee 2x faster SQL performance? GQ, you want to talk about the best practices here?
Sure, Dan. First of all, want to make sure there's enough DRAM available memory to do the caching. Now, if there isn't, of course, as I indicated, we just won't, the one telememory will not function there. It'll just go in the background. So if you want to get the gains, we suggest or recommend at least 4 to 16 gigabytes of available memory on your system. And you may have to, if there isn't any, you may have to add some, or as we have seen also in this step 2, SQL is not very intelligent on how much it allocates for its own caching technology. What it tries to do is it will just try to load all its databases into memory, even though a lot of that data, those data, is not getting access. So it's just a waste of resource there. So one of the best practices in this case is to limit SQL and how much it uses, and let us use some of that memory. Fact is, we had a third-party benchmark doing this, and by allowing us to have a little bit of that memory, 4 to 8 gigabytes, we're able to increase the transaction rate by over 60% in that benchmark case. And then, the third one is put on there and look at the Velocity dashboard and seeing how much traffic is being offloaded. And if you want more, just add a little more available memory on the systems. And that's it, Dan.
It's perfect, GQ. And folks, again, using idle DRAM 10 to 15 times faster than flash, the more read intensive the environment, the better your performance is going to be. So even taking away some memory from SQL, again, if it's read intensive, you'll see a benefit. So what are next steps? For attending the webinar today, you're going to receive a free NFR copy, not for resale copy of Velocity for server license, a $525 value today. So I've installed it, myself. So if I can do it, it's going to be a no-brainer for you all. Install the software on whatever particular server you'd like to. Now, in the caching algorithm, as GQ mentioned, learns your application. It looks for those performance-robbing read IOs, and that's what it's going to put into the DRAM cache. So it takes a while for it to do that. So don't expect results in the first 5 or 10 minutes. Give it 24 plus hours to adjust, and then go take a look at the dashboard and see what's happening. I also, if you recall, shared an example of and best practice of putting us on all the VMs on a particular host. Again, the idea being that we can optimize one VM, but the other VMs, and it's called the noisy neighbor effect, their small, tiny, random, noisy IO will degrade the performance of that single VM that you've optimized. So we're happy, and we do it all the time, of working with customers to install our host license. And that really, by the name is just that we cover all the VMs on a particular host, whether they're 5, 10, 20, 30. The license covers all the VMs. By the way, at GQ, we really failed to mention one important attribute of the software that's been out there for over a year. GQ and his team, with the latest release of Velocity 7.0, we no longer require a reboot to install our software in the OS. Folks, it takes minutes to install the software. The longest time it takes to install is to download the software. After that, it's click, 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 and you're installed and running. This no reboot version has been out for over a year. It is just so seamless, so non-disruptive. It's incredible how easy it makes it for you to install. And if you're installing across multiple VMs, we have a management console that allows you to do that again in just minutes. You select the servers you want to install Velocity on, you click install Velocity, go get a cup of coffee or an iced tea, come on back, and you're installed across multiple VMs. As easy as that. So we're really excited about working with you if you'd like to put us across a host or multiple host environment. Folks, I've had prospects that have attended the webinar and installed us on in a 6-host environment to fully optimize all of their I/O across that, and again, free of charge. So pretty easy to do, and we love working with you. So GQ, I'm hoping that we've got a few questions that popped up in the question box.
We do, Dan, and let me go start addressing some of these, and keep them coming in the questions. So Perk asks, on this caching, how safe is it? What if the system goes down? Is that data in the cache lost? Well, it's a good question. We are a read caching only. And what that means is that data that is in cache is already down on your storage. So if system goes down and that data in the cache is gone, doesn't matter because that data is already down at your storage. Data integrity is our first priority. And so good question there. Then I have from John asking, you talk about SQL. What about my other servers, my file servers, Exchange servers, Outlooks? Well, we talk about SQL because it's very I/O intensive. But any system that is I/O intensive, those are our sweet spots. And we see the same performance gains on these other systems like file servers or Exchange servers, Outlook. So it's just not SQL here.
Yep, SharePoint, domain controllers, anything running Windows is a real good target for our software. And again, it just takes minutes to install.
And then Sarav asked, does this work on physical servers? And yes, it does. We've shown here how it works on virtual systems, but our software works just as well on physical systems. And physical systems have the same issues as the virtual systems. For instance, that Windows I/O attack, that's still going to happen on the physical system running Windows. And then, at that I/O blender effect, instead of the hypervisor causing it, let's look at all these physical systems. Another example is all going I/O to different LUNs on the same SAN. So you get that same I/O blender effect. So yes, works great on physical systems. And then I saw Ronald, yes, is this free version you're giving us a free version for a single VM? And Dan, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, you're absolutely right. So so we have two licensing models. One is a per server model, so per VM model, and the other, as I mentioned before, is a host-based model. Now, we don't install on the host. We install on the guests or VMs that are on that host. And the break-even point is 7 VMs on a host. So if they're less than 7, the per VM model is going to be the most cost effective, but once you reach 7 and above, the host-based model is more cost effective for you.
And Dan, you kind of answered the next question here, and that is, does it get installed on the hypervisor or the VM guest machines? It actually gets installed on the VM guest machines running Windows. We're agnostic to what type of hypervisor is being used there. So, servers, desktop, VDI, virtual machines are running there. Those are where we get installed in. Now, and a good way to look at that, that's where the IO is getting created. So if we can optimize it right there, where the IO is getting created, you're going to get the best gains. Then a follow-up question was asking, does it have to get installed on every VM? No, it's not required to put it on every VM. You can just put on the one that is that you need the most help on, But we do recommend that you try to install it on all the VMs under that same host. And as Dan indicated, the reason for that is, even though we're optimizing that IO on that one system, the other systems are still clogging up that network there to that storage. And so if we can clean it up on all the VMs on that one host, you're going to get the best performance there. I see Matt asked, what versions of VMware is supported? Good question, Matt. And we're, as I said, we're agnostic to the hypervisor that's doing it there. So it doesn't matter. We're just running on the Windows systems, on the client systems. And then pricing and how's this licensed? I know, Dan, you went over that, but could you go over that again for Jamie on the licensing issue?
Absolutely. So Jamie, again, it's either a per VM model or a per host model. And again, per VM is roughly $525. These are perpetual licenses. So there's a one-time license charge, and then there's just an annual maintenance. So one-time license charge, then annual maintenance for on into infinity.
And then Lewis asked, how is this also well recommended for data warehouses? Yes. Anything that is very IO intensive, like data warehouses, where you're doing a lot of reads and writes and repetitive, then this is where you're going to see a lot of gains here, Lewis. And what I do suggest is that you're going to get a free copy here. You look at what systems are you going to put on, and as I said, and Dan recommended, you get the trialware to put on the rest of the systems there under that host. Look at some of the applications, how they're running right now. And, you're here because some of these are not performing as well as you want them to be. So look at what the performance is then, and then put our software in there and look at that performance again. And you can do that along with our dashboard to see what this product is doing by eliminating those IOs. And Dan, I believe that's it for now.
Well, fantastic, GQ. Again, thanks everybody for joining. I hope you found the time well spent, informative, and if anything, as we've talked about, you're going to get a free copy of our software to install. As GQ just mentioned, and thanks for doing that, GQ, it is really important to get some kind of a before benchmark before you install us, because as soon as we get installed, we're going to start optimizing immediately, improving the IO profile of your environment. So having a good before measurement, whether it's stopwatch time, etc., on any one of the applications that you're going to install us on is really key, to judge, again, the before and after. And again, what's important, obviously, is what it does in your environment. So look for the email from us. It'll be coming to you. Thanks very much for your time. And again, we are very interested in working with you to make sure that we can help you improve performance and optimize your environment. So don't hesitate to reach out. Also, no question is a bad one. So we're happy to answer any and all questions. GQ, thank you for taking the time to join the folks and myself today. Really appreciate it. And thank you again.
Thank you, Dan. Glad to be part of this. And, I'm on the tech side. I'm not the sales guy, but what I get joy out is watching people run the software and get the gain. So please try it and report back any success stories back to us. We really enjoy that. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Look forward to working with you.